The laughter stopped before the spoon hit the bowl. "Mom, we really can't take you to Santorini," Alex said, careful but firm. "It's too long a flight. You'd be miserable." Evelyn froze beside the table, hands still hovering over the salad. The roast chicken smell turned heavy, almost sour. Nora poured more wine, smiling too easily. "We'll send photos," she said. "You'll feel like you're there." The words landed softly but cut deep. It was supposed to be a family dinner, yet she sat like an extra in her own story. Her grandson Leo pushed peas across his plate, avoiding her eyes. Evelyn straightened her back. "Too old for sunsets, then." "Mom, it's not like that," Alex sighed. "You've got your hip, the time change. I'm not porcelain," she said, but he kept talking. The chandelier light shimmered over his face, the same face she'd once wiped tears from after scraped knees. Now he looked at her like something fragile, inconvenient. Nora leaned closer to him. "It's better this way. You'll have quiet time. Pain again. Quiet." That word again. Quiet was what filled her bed after her husband died, what settled in her bones when no one said her name. She smiled. "I'll lock up. Don't worry." After dinner, she washed dishes alone while laughter floated from the living room. On the counter sat the mail. She thumbed through and stopped at a thick envelope. Travel agency logo. She tore it open and saw 4 plane tickets. Departure in 3 days. Her name wasn't there. Evelyn set them on the table, each one a small betrayal. The kettle hissed. She poured tea, watching steam blur her reflection in the window. Outside, the garden lay quiet. Inside, her world felt smaller than ever. She thought of knocking on their door, of saying, "Take me with you." But pride had sharper teeth than sorrow. She picked up the phone and dialed the number printed on the tickets. "Good evening, Horizon Travels," a young woman answered. "I'd like to cancel 4 tickets to Santorini under the name Morgan." A pause. "May I ask why, ma'am?" "No," Evelyn said. "Just cancel them." The woman hesitated, then agreed. Evelyn wrote the confirmation number on a napkin. When she hung up, the house was still except for the slow tick of the clock. She looked at the photo of her late husband, Thomas, smiling behind glass. "You'd have laughed," she whispered. "Your son planning paradise without his mother." Something inside her steadied. Not anger, clarity. She opened the desk drawer, took out her passport. Still valid. Then she checked her savings account. Enough for a trip. She hadn't traveled since Thomas's funeral. She'd been saving for emergencies. Maybe this was one. Morning came gray and cold. She slipped on her old coat, grabbed her bag, called a cab. The driver didn't ask questions as fog rolled past the windows. Downtown, the travel agency near the pier smelled of dust and ink. A young clerk looked up. "Destination?" "Istanbul," she said. "Aisle seat." He smiled. "Traveling alone?" "Yes," she replied. Finally. That night she packed light. Her sketchbook, a silk scarf Thomas once gave her, 1 pair of soft shoes. She wrote a short note and slid it under Alex's coffee mug. "Don't worry. The house is locked. Water the orchids." At dawn, she closed the door quietly and walked down the path lined with wet leaves. The air smelled of salt and rain. At the corner, she hesitated only a second, then kept walking. The airport buzzed with metallic echoes and overlapping voices. At the counter, the gate agent scanned her passport. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am." Evelyn looked toward the bright runway. "I intend to," she said. On the plane, she took her seat by the aisle. The window glowed orange with sunrise. A baby cried behind her, a strangely comforting sound. She opened her old leather journal, its pages yellowed. For years it held grocery lists and reminders. Now she wrote something new. "They told me to stay behind, so I went first." Her handwriting trembled, but the words were sure. The engines roared. The ground slid away beneath her feet. She closed her eyes, feeling weight lift from her chest. The city below grew small and silver, the ocean wide and bright. Evelyn smiled. For the first time in decades, no one was waiting for her, and that, she realized, was the point. The flight trembled through gray clouds, the world outside fading into white. Evelyn kept her hands folded on the tray, pretending calm while her stomach turned. She hadn't flown in 30 years. Back then, Thomas had been alive, laughing through turbulence, saying it was just the sky stretching. Now, she was stretching alone. A flight attendant leaned over. "Something to drink, ma'am?" "Water," Evelyn said. Her voice sounded smaller than she meant. Around her, passengers scrolled through glowing screens or slept with open mouths. The engine's hum filled the silence she carried. She closed her eyes and saw Alex's face again, patient, dismissive, and Nora's polished smile, a curtain pulled over guilt. She should feel remorse, maybe even fear, but guilt felt distant now, like a language she'd forgotten. When sunlight burst through the clouds, the cabin glowed gold. Evelyn pressed her palm against the window and whispered, "I'm here." Istanbul airport pulsed with motion and sound. Voices tangled in half a dozen languages. Luggage wheels clattered across the marble floor. At passport control, the officer studied her photo. "First time in Turkey?" "Yes," she said. "First time anywhere in a long time." He stamped her passport. "Then welcome." Outside, horns blared, seagulls cried, and the air smelled of roasted nuts and sea salt. She took a yellow taxi racing along the Bosphorus. The water flashed silver beneath bridges that tied two continents together. Istanbul belonged to both East and West, never choosing sides. Evelyn liked that, belonging nowhere and everywhere at once. The cab stopped at a small guest house in Galata, its walls cracked but bright with flowers. The owner, a plump woman with soft eyes, greeted her. "Mrs. Tran, room 301, breakfast at 8. Turkish coffee, very strong." "Perfect," Evelyn said. Her room was simple. Brass bed, lace curtains, the faint scent of lemon soap. She unpacked slowly, sketchbook, scarf, watercolors, and placed Thomas's photo on the nightstand. "You'd like this place," she whispered. "You'd say it smells like adventure." That evening, she wandered the cobbled street below. Lamps glowed through the fog, and the city hummed with life. She found a cafe tucked beneath sycamores, ordered tea, and took a corner seat. Locals laughed and gestured wildly, their joy untidy and warm. She envied it. Behind the counter stood a woman about her age, wrapped in an indigo dress, gray hair twisted into a bun. When their eyes met, the woman came over. "You are alone?" she asked in accented English. "Yes, just arrived." The woman smiled. "First day is hardest. Tomorrow you will see colors you didn't know existed." She extended her hand. "I'm Yara." They talked as the cafe emptied. Yara owned the bookstore next door, she said, selling secondhand poetry and forgotten novels. "Books are orphans," Yara added. "I give them new homes." Evelyn laughed, surprised at how easily it came. When she returned to her room, she opened her journal. "Today I crossed an ocean," she wrote. "I thought I'd feel lost, but I feel smaller and freer. Maybe freedom begins where certainty ends." Unable to sleep, she stepped onto the balcony. Across the rooftops, the call to prayer rose and fell like waves. It didn't sound mournful, it sounded like invitation. Ships moved through the black water below, crossing from one continent to another as if it were nothing. Evelyn pulled her scarf tighter, breathing the cold air. Somewhere far away, Alex would be finding her note. He'd call, then panic. Nora would say she misunderstood, that old people do impulsive things. They would check her accounts, her plants, her neighbors. Eventually, they'd realize she hadn't asked permission. She smiled, a quiet, private smile. In the morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, thick with dust and promise. She dressed, brushed her silver hair, and went downstairs. Yara stood outside her bookstore, fumbling with the keys. "Come," she said. "Coffee is better with company." Inside the shop was a maze of leaning shelves and soft dust. Evelyn ran her hand along cracked spines until a small book stopped her, a collection of French poems, its pages yellowed and full of blue ink notes. She opened it to a line underlined twice. "We leave home not to escape, but to find the part of us we left behind." She bought it without hesitation. As Yara wrapped it in brown paper, she said, "Every traveler finds one sentence that belongs to them. This one is yours." Evelyn stepped outside. The wind from the sea carried the scent of coffee and bread. She held the book to her chest and watched the morning crowd pour through the narrow street. People with plans, people in motion. For the first time in years, she felt like one of them. Not someone waiting to be remembered, but someone finally beginning. Morning rose over Istanbul in a wash of gold. From her window, Evelyn watched vendors push carts of bread and children scatter pigeons across the square. The air smelled of salt and sesame. For once, no one needed her voice, her hands, or her permission. The silence felt like permission of its own. She went down to breakfast. The cafe smelled of strong coffee and sugar. Yara waved her over from a corner table, her silver bangles glinting in the light. "Sit," she said. "This is the good seat. You can see the street." They talked between sips of dark coffee and bites of sweet rolls. Yara told stories about her husband, a jazz musician gone for 12 years but still playing somewhere, she said. "The city keeps me company. It's full of ghosts who mind their own business." Evelyn smiled. "I've got a few of those, too." After breakfast, Yara offered to show her around. They wandered narrow lanes lined with antiques and peeling blue walls. Cats slept in doorways. Men shouted greetings across balconies. Life here refused to be quiet. Near Galata Tower, Yara stopped. "You paint, yes?" "Used to," Evelyn said. "Then start again. This city never stays still long enough to be perfect. Good for artists." Later, Evelyn sat on a park bench with her sketchbook open. She drew rooftops, birds, and a boy flying a red kite. The lines wobbled, but her heart steadied. A passerby smiled at the gray-haired woman sketching in the sun, and she smiled back. For the first time in years, she felt seen. When the first call to prayer drifted across the Bosphorus, she packed up and stopped at a bakery. The window gleamed with pastries soaked in honey. She bought two, one for herself, one for Yara. Yara was sitting outside her bookstore when Evelyn returned. "You're learning to walk like a local," she teased. "Slowly?" Evelyn asked. "No, with purpose." They shared the pastries and watched the street pulse with life. "You know," Yara said, "people vanish here all the time. Some because they're lost, others because they finally found where they belong." Evelyn tasted the words like sugar that lingered. Up in her room later, she turned on her phone for the first time since arriving. Dozens of missed calls. Alex, Nora, even Leo. Her grandson's message blinked. "Grandma, are you okay?" "Dad's worried." She typed a reply, "I'm fine, don't worry," then deleted it. She wasn't ready to send anything. Instead, she opened her journal. "Today I drew again. The lines remembered even when I didn't. Maybe I'm not lost. Maybe I'm only unfinished." A knock startled her. When she opened the door, no one was there, only an envelope on the floor, her name written neatly across it. Inside was a single page, old and folded twice. "I heard you taught at St. Mary's School in Saigon. If this reaches you, know that one of your students never forgot your kindness. Signed, Min." Evelyn sat down hard, the paper trembling in her fingers. She remembered a shy boy who painted ships and dreamed of seeing the world. Could it be him? How could he know she was here? The letter held no return address, only the faint scent of ink and time. When Yara came later with tea, Evelyn showed her the note. "You see," Yara said, "the city speaks to those who listen. But how did he find me?" "Maybe you found him first," Yara said. "The heart leaves footprints long after we forget where we walked." That night, rain whispered against the windows. Evelyn lay awake with the letter on her chest, remembering chalk dust, monsoon rain, the echo of children's laughter. She saw Min again, bent over his drawing, his brow furrowed in fierce concentration. Once she had told him, "Art isn't what you see. It's what refuses to be forgotten." Maybe he hadn't forgotten. Outside, thunder rolled far away. Evelyn thought of her son across the ocean, pacing, angry, afraid. He would not understand this freedom. Not yet. Maybe someday. She turned toward the window. Across the rooftops, raindrops blurred the city lights. For years, she had lived like a photograph, framed, still, fading. But tonight she felt movement again, quiet and real, like the pulse of something newly alive. She smiled in the dark. Istanbul hummed below her, alive with secrets and beginnings, and for the first time in a long time, Evelyn Tran no longer felt like someone waiting to be included. She felt like someone who had finally arrived. Sunlight spilled through lace curtains, painting gold patterns across the small room. Evelyn woke to the scent of bread drifting from the street below and the letter from Min lying beside her on the nightstand. She had read it through the night, as if each reading might change what it meant. At breakfast, Yara was already waiting, stirring her coffee. "You didn't sleep," she said. "You look like someone who saw a ghost." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Maybe I did. An old student wrote to me. I taught him in Vietnam decades ago. I thought they'd all forgotten." Yara tilted her head. "Some memories grow even when you stop watering them." "I don't even know where he is," Evelyn said. "Then find out," Yara replied. "People who remember you are worth remembering back." After breakfast, Evelyn walked to the post office near the harbor, asking about sending a letter to Athens, the only clue from Min's note. The clerk's English was broken, but kind. She bought stamps she might never use. Sometimes hope required proof. Outside, clouds gathered above the rooftops. Vendors shouted, seagulls screamed, the city breathing around her. She wandered toward the water, past stalls selling lanterns and scarves. At a small cart, a boy offered her hand-painted postcards. "For sending or keeping?" he asked. "Keeping," she said, choosing one showing a lone woman crossing a bridge. That afternoon, when she returned to the bookstore, Yara handed her a small parcel. "This came for you." The handwriting was the same as the letter. Inside was a slim sketchbook filled with drawings, markets, harbors, faces. The first page held a note, "For the teacher who taught me to see light in rain, Min." Evelyn turned the pages slowly. His lines were sure, full of movement. One sketch stopped her breath. An older woman sitting by a window, a scarf around her shoulders, her face unmistakable. She pressed her fingers to the page, her eyes wet. Yara watched. "You've been seen," she said softly. "That is the rarest thing." Later, Evelyn carried her own sketchbook to the waterfront. She sat on a bench and began to draw. The bridge arching over water, the curve of a gull in flight. Her pencil trembled, but the city held still, long enough for her to remember how to see. Every line felt like breathing again. For years she had lived quietly, shrinking herself to fit the corners of other people's lives. Now the world asked her to expand. As the sky deepened, fairies moved like glowing insects across the Bosphorus. Evelyn thought of Min, Maybe in Athens, maybe somewhere else entirely, painting under the same fading light. She smiled. "We're both crossing water," she whispered. Back at the guest house, Yara waited outside her door with a bowl of soup. "You forget to eat when your heart is full," she said. "Tomorrow, come with me to Kadıköy. The market there argues louder than any family." "That sounds perfect," Evelyn laughed. That night, she dreamed of her classroom in Saigon. The smell of chalk and rain drifted through the open windows. Children's voices recited poetry. Then Thomas appeared in the doorway, young again, his smile steady. "You were always meant to travel," he said. "You just waited too long to believe it." Evelyn woke before dawn, unsure if the dream was blessing or memory. She brewed tea and watched the first ferry move through fog. Later that morning, she followed Yara to the pier. The ferry ride was short but felt endless, seagulls chasing the wake. Yara leaned on the railing. Every day people cross this water without thinking, Europe to Asia and back. It reminds me that borders are lies we agree to believe. Evelyn nodded. "Maybe the same is true of age," she said. "We draw lines around what we think we can't do." They laughed, the wind tangling their hair. Kadıköy was chaos and perfume. Vendors shouted prices, women haggled over olives, and the air smelled of lemon and salt. Yara pressed a handful of green olives into Evelyn's palm. "Taste," she said. Evelyn chewed, wincing at the bitterness. "See?" Yara smiled. Life, too. Bitter first, then just right. When they returned that evening, the city glowed pink with sunset. Evelyn opened her journal and wrote, "Min found me. Maybe we never stop teaching the people we once loved. Maybe we never stop learning either." She paused, watching ferries scatter light across the dark water. Somewhere beyond that horizon, a student had remembered her name. Maybe that was enough. She dipped her pen again and wrote, "Tomorrow I'll write back. Not to explain why I left, but to say thank you for reminding me who I was before I forgot to live." Rain fell lightly over Istanbul, turning the streets silver. Evelyn sat by the window, tea cooling in her hands. The letter from Min spread open beside her. She dreamed of him again, not as a boy this time, but as a man waiting on a pier, calling her forward. The image stayed long after she woke. Downstairs, Yara was shelving books. "You look like someone deciding whether to stay or go," she said without looking up. Evelyn smiled. "You always know." "It's the traveler's face," Yara replied. "So? Where next?" Evelyn hesitated. "He mentioned Athens once, long ago. Maybe I'll go there. Maybe I'll find him." "Then go," Yara said simply. "But take this." She pressed a small silver charm into Evelyn's palm, an eye carved in its center. For protection from men, weather, and your own doubts. By noon, Evelyn had booked her passage. Yara helped her pack and walked her to the pier. "Write me when you arrive," she said, hugging her tight. The ferry horn sounded like a goodbye too big for words. The crossing was long and rough, waves slapping the hull like warnings. Evelyn sat wrapped in her scarf, watching the water dissolve into fog. She was surprised by her own calm. Once she'd been afraid to drive across town. Now she was chasing a name across an ocean. The ferry docked in Thessaloniki by evening. She spent the night in a small inn near the station. Wallpaper faded to the color of ghosts. At dawn, she boarded a train to Athens. Olive trees flashed by, stitched between hills and small white houses. Her reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but alive in a way she hadn't seen in years. Athens greeted her with heat and noise. She found a modest guest house near a bakery and checked in. The clerk smiled politely. "You travel alone?" "Yes," she said, "and I like it that way." That night, she wandered through the old district. Cafes spilled music into the streets, and vines crawled across stone walls. Artists sold charcoal sketches under the glow of street lamps. She stopped at one stall. "Do you know a painter named Min?" she asked. The young vendor shook his head. "Many Mins, Senora," he said with a shrug. Disappointed, she bought a print anyway, a drawing of a woman on a bridge beneath swirling clouds. She returned to her room and sat by the window, the city humming below. Her phone blinked on the table. A message from Alex. "Mom, please, tell us where you are." She typed slowly. "I'm safe. Don't come. This is mine." Then pressed send before she could take it back. Morning arrived with blinding sun. She visited a gallery near Syntagma Square, drawn by the promise of air conditioning and quiet. The woman at the desk greeted her warmly. "You're looking for something special?" "Someone," Evelyn said. "An artist named Min, Vietnamese. Maybe he lives here." The woman smiled. "Ah, Min Vu. His exhibit is upstairs." Evelyn's heart stumbled. She climbed the stairs slowly. The gallery was small, its walls covered with oceans and faces painted in restless blue. In the far corner, one painting made her stop. A woman by a window, silver hair glowing, eyes turned toward the sea. A voice behind her said softly, "I hoped you'd find me." She turned. The man was older, gray threaded through his hair, but his smile was unchanged. "Min," she breathed. He bowed his head. "You once told us, paint what you feel, not what you see." "I tried." Her throat tightened. "You remembered." "How could I forget?" he said gently. "You were the first person who ever looked at my work and said it mattered." They talked for hours in the quiet gallery, about Saigon, about loss, about the years that had slipped through their fingers. Min told her he had moved to Greece after the war, painting ports and strangers, always chasing the light she'd described. "I wanted to paint the way you taught me, to see what endures," he said. When evening came, they walked outside together. The Acropolis glowed above the city, its marble washed in gold. Evelyn whispered, "Thomas would have loved this." "Then he's here too," Min said softly. Later, back in her room, she opened her journal. "I found him. Or maybe I found the girl I used to be, the one who believed art could outlive regret. Either way, I am no longer missing." She set down her pen and watched the city lights flicker through the open window. The air was warm, fragrant with dust and possibility. Somewhere below, a violin played, notes rising like prayer. Evelyn closed her eyes and smiled. She hadn't come to find someone else. She had come to find herself, and she had. The morning broke clear and blue over Athens. Evelyn woke before sunrise, the city still quiet beyond her window. Steam rose from the tea in her cup as she reread Min's note one last time. It was short, but it had changed something in her. She felt steadier now, as if she'd finally found the road she'd been walking toward all along. Min met her for breakfast at a small cafe near the square. Pigeons swirled overhead, chasing crumbs tossed by children. "You'll stay in Athens long?" he asked. "A few days," she said, "then Lisbon. I think I need to see the ocean again." He smiled, still chasing light. "Maybe just following myself," she replied. They spoke of old classrooms and lost years. When they parted, he handed her a folded sketch. "For your next stop," he said. In it, she stood at a window with her face turned toward the sea, sunlight catching her silver hair. It was how she wanted to be remembered. That afternoon, she wandered through the museum near the Acropolis. Marble figures gleamed white beneath the heat. She stopped before a sculpture of a woman holding a broken jar. The plaque read, "Memory and Loss." Evelyn stared at it a long time, feeling an odd peace. She'd spent half her life trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. Maybe it was enough to simply hold what remained. That night, she packed her small suitcase again. Min's sketch stayed behind on the desk, her quiet thank you. At dawn, she boarded a train heading west. The wheels clattered like heartbeat. Each passing mile stretched her further from the woman she used to be. When the train stopped at the port, she transferred to the ferry bound for Portugal. The sea shimmered beneath the morning light, calm and wide. Evelyn leaned on the railing, wind tugging her scarf. Somewhere between continents, she realized she was no longer running from home. She was traveling toward herself. By dusk, Lisbon rose from the mist. Pale pink buildings stacked along steep hills. The air smelled of salt and oranges. She found a small guest house near the waterfront. Blue shutters, tile floors, a window that opened to the sea. The owner, an older man with kind eyes, handed her the key. "You're traveling alone?" "Yes," she said, "but not lonely." That evening, she walked along the harbor. A man sat on a stool playing fado, his voice cracked but beautiful. The song drifted through the air, full of longing and calm. Evelyn stopped and listened, her chest tightening. It wasn't sadness she felt, it was recognition. At a corner market, she bought bread, cheese, and a single daisy in a jar. The vendor grinned. "Gift for someone?" "For me," she said, and his smile widened. She cooked in the guest house kitchen that night. Simple food, fragrant and enough. She ate on the balcony, the city glowing below. Every window she could see was lit. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like an outsider looking in. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Alex. "Mom, where are you? Please call. We're worried." She stared at it, then typed, "I'm safe. Don't come. I need this time." Before she could hesitate, she pressed send. The next morning, she met a guest named Sophia, a retired dancer with a limp and a laugh that filled the courtyard. They spent the day wandering through Alfama's maze of streets, stopping for pastries and shade. "We're not lost," Sophia said when they realized they had circled the same fountain twice. "We're just elsewhere." Evelyn laughed until her eyes watered. In the evening, they returned to the same Fado cafe. The singer's voice trembled through the air like a thread of silver. Evelyn closed her eyes. "It's strange," she whispered. "I thought freedom would sound louder." Sophia smiled. "Real freedom whispers, dear." Later, back in her room, Evelyn opened her journal. "Lisbon feels like forgiveness. The city doesn't rush. It just breathes. I think I'm learning how to breathe too." She paused, pen hovering. Beyond the window, waves shimmered under the moon. Somewhere, a church bell struck 9. "Maybe I'm not escaping anything," she wrote finally. "Maybe I'm just returning to myself, to stillness, to the part of me that remembers joy without permission." She closed the book, turned off the light, and stood at the window for a long time. The sea rolled softly below, endless and calm. Evelyn smiled, her reflection fading into the glass until all that remained was the view, the quiet, shining proof that she had finally come home to herself. Lisbon woke to the sound of gulls and soft bells. Evelyn stood on the balcony with coffee warming her hands, watching sunlight crawl across the rooftops. The daisy she'd bought 2 days before still leaned toward the sun. She felt the same way, bent but reaching. She met Sophia at the riverside market. Stalls overflowed with figs, tiles, and bright scarves that snapped in the wind. "This city never hides its heart," Sophia said, handing her a slice of melon. "It just keeps beating, no matter who leaves." Evelyn smiled. "Maybe that's what I want, a life that keeps beating." That afternoon, they visited an art fair in a cobbled plaza. Paintings lined the walls, their colors shimmering under the sun. One canvas stopped Evelyn cold, a harbor painted in blues and ochre, almost identical to Min's work. She bought it, though she didn't need another thing to carry. At sunset, she returned to the guest house. Her phone flashed, 12 missed calls from Alex, 2 from Nora. She didn't open them. Instead, she wrote to Leo, "Tell your parents I'm all right. This isn't running away. It's catching up to the woman they forgot I was." She pressed send, then turned off the phone. The silence felt good, earned. The next morning, the guest house manager handed her an envelope. "For you, from Greece." Inside was a postcard of the Acropolis, Min's handwriting looping across the back. "You were right about light. It doesn't ask to be seen. It just arrives." Evelyn smiled. She placed it beside her journal and wrote beneath it, "So do we." She spent the afternoon riding the tram through Lisbon's narrow hills. Children waved as it clattered past laundry lines and tile-covered houses. Evelyn rested her head against the window, watching the city slide by in shades of blue and gold. For the first time, she wasn't thinking of what came next. She was simply there. Halfway through the ride, her phone buzzed again. A message from Alex. "Mom, the kids miss you. Please send a picture." She hesitated, then turned the camera toward the window. The reflection showed her silver hair, her face calm, Lisbon glowing behind her. She sent it without a caption. That evening, Sophia invited her to a dinner in a courtyard full of candlelight and music. Neighbors gathered around a long table, wine bottles scattered like trophies. When they learned Evelyn used to teach art, a young woman asked, "What's the most important thing to know about painting?" Evelyn thought for a moment. That nothing stays still. The trick isn't to capture life, it's to join it while it moves. The table fell quiet, then someone murmured, "That's beautiful." After dinner, Sophia walked her home. "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "Seville next." "Ah," Sophia smiled. "That city dances even when no one's watching. You'll fit right in." Back in her room, Evelyn began packing. Her suitcase looked emptier now, her belongings fewer. She'd learned how to travel light, not just in luggage, but in memory. She left the daisy on the balcony, its petals opening toward the wind. Someone else would find it in the morning. Before sleeping, she checked her phone again. A message from Leo. "Dad saw your photo. He didn't say much, but he looked proud. I think he finally understands." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. She typed back, "Tell him I'm happy. Tell him he doesn't need to chase me. I'm exactly where I should be." Rain began to fall outside, soft and rhythmic. She opened her journal. Min's postcard arrived. Sophia calls Lisbon the city of second breaths. She's right. I'm not searching for the past anymore. I'm practicing the art of staying awake to what's new. She paused, listening to the rain. The city smelled of wet stone and promise. "Tomorrow I'll take the train east," she wrote. "Not because I'm lost, but because movement has become my prayer." At dawn, she rose quietly, dressed, and tied her scarf. The air outside was cool, touched with salt and smoke from the early bakeries. At the station, she bought a ticket to Seville, window seat. The clerk smiled. Business or pleasure? Evelyn returned the smile. Neither, for remembering. When the train pulled away, Lisbon blurred into color and light. She pressed her palm to the glass and whispered goodbye, not to the city, but to the woman who had once waited for permission to live. Ahead, the sky widened into gold, and Evelyn closed her eyes, steady in the rhythm of the rails, carrying only what mattered. The train slid into Seville beneath a haze of orange light. Evelyn stepped onto the platform, heat wrapping around her like a living thing. The air smelled of dust, oranges, and promise. Her hotel sat between a bakery and a shoe shop that reeked of leather and sugar. The room was simple, white walls, a balcony overlooking a courtyard of orange trees. From somewhere nearby came the low pulse of a guitar, the sound curling through the air like smoke. Evelyn unpacked slowly, hung her scarf over a chair, and stood by the open window, breathing in the scent of citrus and sun. When night came, she followed the rhythm of music through narrow alleys until she found a small flamenco bar. Inside, a woman older than Evelyn danced barefoot across the wooden floor. Her gray hair was pinned in a crimson flower, her body taut and fierce. Each stomp of her heels struck like thunder. Evelyn watched, transfixed. The dancer wasn't pretending to be young. She was proving that time could not tame her. When the music ended, applause thundered. The dancer caught Evelyn's gaze and nodded, a brief, knowing smile. Evelyn left trembling with admiration. Outside, the night smelled of jasmine. She walked back slowly, her pulse still matching the rhythm of the dance. In her journal that night, she wrote, "She moved like defiance itself. Maybe freedom isn't a place but a gesture." The next morning, she found a cafe shaded by striped awnings. "Vacation?" the young waiter asked as he poured her coffee. "Something like that," Evelyn said. She spent hours sketching. Children chasing a ball, a woman hanging laundry, pigeons scattered across a sunlit square. Her lines were steady now, confident. When she paused to stretch, she realized people were smiling at her work. She smiled back. It felt like reclaiming something small but sacred. By noon, the heat grew heavy, pushing her indoors. She napped until her phone buzzed on the table, a voice message from Leo. "Grandma." His voice cracked slightly. "Dad's calmer now. He says he understands you needed space. Mom doesn't yet, but she's trying. I miss you. Send me a photo of Spain." Evelyn listened twice, then stepped onto the balcony and snapped a picture of the courtyard filled with oranges. "Tell your dad I'm okay," she texted. Sometimes distance is how we learn to see clearly. That afternoon, she joined other guests in the courtyard, 2 sisters from Italy and a Moroccan couple traveling for their anniversary. They shared wine and laughter, swapping stories about places that had changed them. When someone asked why she was traveling alone, Evelyn said, "Because I forgot how to belong to myself. I'm remembering now." They raised their glasses to that. At sunset, the courtyard filled with music. A guest played guitar, another began to sing. Evelyn didn't know the words, but she understood the tone, yearning, fierce, alive. She let herself sway with it. Later, she wandered through the quiet streets. Couples strolled arm in arm, lights flickered across the river, the air warm and forgiving. No one looked twice at her, a woman with silver hair walking alone. For the first time, she liked being invisible. It meant she belonged to herself. She sat beneath an orange tree and closed her eyes. The smell of the blossoms pulled her somewhere between memory and peace. She thought of Thomas, not in grief, but gratitude. "You'd laugh at this," she whispered. "Your quiet wife finally out in the world, dancing in her head." Back in her room, she opened her journal again. Seville feels like fire under the skin. The world doesn't apologize for being alive, and neither should I. She hesitated, then added, "Leo's message made me cry. Not because he misses me, but because he finally sees me." The next morning, church bells broke the dawn. Evelyn packed her bag, leaving behind a small sketch on the nightstand. The flamenco dancer mid-step, one arm raised toward the light. Beneath it, she wrote, "For whoever comes next, don't wait to be asked to live." At the train station, the clerk asked, "Destination?" Evelyn smiled, "Granada." When the train began to move, Seville receded into color and sound. Evelyn pressed her hand to the glass, watching sunlight spill across the fields. The rhythm of the wheels matched her heartbeat. She didn't feel old or brave or even lost. She felt alive, And that, she thought, was enough. Granada appeared beneath the mountains like a secret whispered in stone. The air was cooler here, edged with pine and dust. Evelyn stepped off the train, the sun flaring against the hills, and felt something shift inside her, a calm unlike anything she'd known before. Her inn sat on a quiet street overlooking tiled rooftops and narrow lanes. From her balcony, she could see the faint outline of the Alhambra above the city, golden in the afternoon light. She unpacked her sketchbook, laid her scarf over the chair, and thought, this might be the last stop. That evening, she climbed the hill toward the old fortress. The streets wound upward through arches and gardens thick with jasmine. Musicians played guitars in the corners, and the sound drifted with the wind. Evelyn stopped halfway to rest, her knees aching but her heart light. At the top, the view opened like a prayer. Terracotta roofs, cypress trees, and mountains fading into dusk. A young couple nearby asked if she'd take their photo. When they offered to take one of her in return, she hesitated, then nodded. She stood against the stone wall, hands on her hips, the city sprawling below. The flash went off, and for a moment she felt captured, not as someone's mother or widow, but as herself. Back at the inn, she found a message from Leo. Grandma, I showed Dad your photo from Seville. He didn't say much, but he kept looking at it. I think he misses you. Evelyn smiled sadly. She typed, tell him it's okay to miss me. It means he's remembering. The next morning, she set out early for the Alhambra. The climb was steep, but the air smelled of orange blossoms and earth. Inside the palace, water whispered through marble fountains. Light moved across the tiles like living gold. Evelyn walked slowly, touching the cool walls, wondering how many hands had done the same for centuries. In one courtyard, a guide explained that the builders carved poems into the stone, so the walls would speak. Evelyn traced the inscriptions with her fingertips. Words surviving long after voices fade, there was comfort in that. She sat on a bench overlooking the garden, opened her sketchbook, and began to draw. Her lines no longer wavered. They moved with quiet certainty, recording arches, shadows, and the curve of a fountain. When she finished, she felt something unclench deep inside. Later, as she rested under an olive tree, her phone buzzed again. A message from Alex. Mom, we found your letters. I think I finally understand. You weren't leaving us, you were finding you. I'm sorry it took this long. Evelyn read it twice. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she wrote back, I never wanted to be gone, Alex. I just needed space to be seen. I love you. Always have. She hesitated, then added, come visit me someday. Bring Leo. Bring your questions. As evening fell, she walked down to a cafe near the river. The tables were crowded with locals, the air alive with conversation. A guitarist played a soft melody, one that made her think of Yara in Istanbul and Sofia in Lisbon, women who had appeared like guideposts on her map. The waiter poured her a glass of wine, and she lifted it slightly, toasting them in silence. Across the patio, a little girl twirled in circles while her grandmother clapped to the rhythm. Evelyn smiled. Life, it seemed, had a way of repeating itself until someone decided to do it differently. That night, she couldn't sleep. She opened her journal and wrote, Granada glows like forgiveness. The walls remember what people forget. Alex wrote to me, maybe we both grew up too late but still in time. She paused, listening to the wind through the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang midnight. I'm not searching anymore, she continued. I'm simply seeing every wrinkle, every scar, every joy that once hid behind duty. I'm not afraid of time. It's afraid of me. The next morning, she returned to the hill. The city stretched beneath a rising sun, soft and endless. She took the photo Leo had sent, the one from Seville, and placed it inside her sketchbook. On the facing page, she drew herself standing in the same pose, but surrounded by light instead of walls. When she was done, she whispered, "This is me." Back at the inn, she made tea and watched the rooftops gleam. Her phone buzzed once more, a short message from Leo. "Dad smiled when I read your text. He said maybe we could meet you somewhere next summer." Evelyn laughed quietly. "Maybe," she said to no one. Outside, church bells began again, their sound folding into the day. She breathed in deeply, eyes closed. The scent of oranges filled the air, and for the first time, Evelyn felt not like a traveler, but like a piece of the world that had finally found where it belonged. The morning light in Granada poured through the shutters like honey. Evelyn stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, holding a cup of tea and listening to the city stir awake. The sound of church bells echoed down the narrow streets, slow and patient. For once, she didn't feel like she had to hurry anywhere. At breakfast, the innkeeper, an old man with a gentle lisp, pointed toward the hills. "Today the market near the river is open," he said. "Good music, good people." Evelyn smiled and thanked him, tucking her sketchbook into her bag. She had begun to carry it everywhere, not as proof of what she saw, but as a reminder to keep noticing. The market was alive with color and noise. Vendors shouted prices in Spanish, their voices competing with the splash of fountains and the chatter of tourists. Evelyn wandered slowly, fingers grazing woven shawls, jars of honey, and stacks of painted tiles. A young boy handed her a slice of orange and grinned. She tasted it, sweet, sharp, alive. At a pottery stall, she stopped. A woman her age stood behind the counter, shaping clay on a small wheel. Her hands moved steadily, transforming a lump into a bowl. Evelyn watched, entranced. "It's strange," she said softly. "You make it look effortless." The potter looked up. "The clay fights you at first," she said, "but eventually it learns your patience." Evelyn smiled. "People aren't much different." "No," the woman said, "but they break easier." She bought a small cup glazed in blue and gold. "For tea," she told the woman. "For courage," the woman replied. As she walked back through the market, her phone buzzed again. A message from Leo. "Grandma, Dad's thinking about visiting you. He asked where you'll be next. I told him you'd probably know when you arrive there." Evelyn chuckled under her breath. "Smart boy," she typed back. "Tell him I'll write soon." In the afternoon, she hiked the path leading higher above the city. The climb was slow, but she didn't mind. She passed olive trees bending in the wind, their leaves whispering like old friends. When she reached the top, she sat on a stone wall and looked down at the Alhambra glowing in the distance. The view made her ache, not with sadness, but with gratitude. She whispered to herself, "I did it. I really came." Back at the inn, she sketched the mountains until dusk, her lines clean and sure. She didn't think about being good or bad anymore. The act itself was enough. Later, she walked to a small restaurant by the river. Candles flickered in glass jars, and the smell of saffron hung in the air. A flamenco guitarist played softly in the corner. Evelyn took a table near the water and ordered wine. Halfway through her meal, she noticed a man watching her from the bar, not with flirtation, but curiosity, the kind of look that asks, "Who are you?" Sitting here alone and unafraid. When their eyes met, he raised his glass politely. She smiled and nodded back. Nothing more. She didn't need conversation to feel seen anymore. After dinner, she strolled along the river. A breeze lifted her hair, and the city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. For years, she had measured life by who needed her. Now she measured it by moments like this, when no one did, and it was still beautiful. Back in her room, she opened her journal and wrote, "I used to think freedom was leaving. Now I know it's staying long enough to belong." Her phone buzzed once more. This time it was Alex. "Mom, I read your message again. I think you're right. We stopped seeing you as a person. I don't know how to fix that, but I want to try." Evelyn's eyes filled, but her smile was steady. She wrote back, "Then start by seeing yourself too. I'll be home when it feels like a beginning, not an apology." She placed the phone aside and looked out the window. Down below, a group of teenagers were dancing by the fountain, their laughter spilling into the night. One of them slipped, fell, and burst out laughing. The others joined in. Evelyn laughed too, quietly, her chest light. Before bed, she washed the new cup she'd bought, poured herself tea, and held it up toward the open window. "For courage," she whispered, echoing the potter's words. Outside, the wind rustled the trees and carried the faint strum of another guitar. The world, it seemed, had endless songs left for her to hear. Evelyn took a sip, the tea warm against her palms, and thought, "This is what peace tastes like. Simple, real, and mine." Morning in Granada began with birdsong and the smell of baking bread. Evelyn dressed quietly, feeling the calm of a woman who had stopped racing time. She brewed tea in the blue and gold cup she'd bought from the potter. Its surface caught the sunlight like water. "For courage," the woman had said. Evelyn smiled. She had plenty now. Her plan was simple. One last walk through the Albaicin before deciding what came next. The narrow streets wound like memory, full of corners that opened suddenly into light. She stopped by a small shop selling postcards. On one of them, she wrote, "To whoever reads this, don't wait for permission to live. The door is already open." She left it on the counter, unsigned. By noon, she'd reached the overlook facing the Alhambra. The sky shimmered pale blue, and the snow-capped mountains framed the city like a painting. She sat on the stone wall and opened her sketchbook one more time. Her drawings had changed, less careful, more alive. It wasn't about accuracy anymore. It was about truth. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was a voice message from Leo. His voice sounded older somehow. "Dad read your text again last night. He said you're right. It has to be a beginning." Mom's quiet, but she's listening. "Grandma, I'm proud of you." Evelyn's throat tightened. She whispered to the wind, "I'm proud of you too." That afternoon, she found a letter slipped under her door at the inn. The envelope was plain, but the handwriting was familiar, Alex. She sat on the bed and unfolded it slowly. "Mom," it began, "I don't know what to say that doesn't sound like too little, too late. You were always there, and I never looked. I thought love meant keeping you safe, but really I was just keeping you small. Thank you for teaching me that distance can heal. I'd like to visit if you'll have me." Her eyes blurred. She folded the letter carefully and set it beside her cup. For a long time, she just sat there, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket. Then she began to laugh, softly at first, then louder, until her chest ached, not from sadness, but from relief. That evening, she returned to the same cafe by the river. The guitarist was there again, his melody slow and tender. The waiter recognized her. "Back again, Senora?" "I wasn't finished last time," she said. She ordered wine and watched the reflections of lanterns ripple across the water. The laughter from nearby tables mixed with the strum of the guitar. The moment felt full, not perfect, but whole. A woman approached her table, asking if the seat was free. She was tall, with streaks of silver in her hair and a tired kindness in her eyes. "You're alone too?" the woman asked. Evelyn nodded. "By choice." The woman smiled. "Then we're the lucky ones." They talked for hours about family, travel, mistakes, and the strange relief of realizing it was never too late to begin again. The woman's name was Clara, a writer from Argentina working on a book about forgotten women in history. "Maybe I'll include you," Clara said. half joking. "Only if you promise to give me a happy ending," Evelyn replied. When the cafe closed, they exchanged addresses. "If you ever visit Buenos Aires," Clara said, "look for the bookstore with the green awning." "I might," Evelyn said, and she meant it. Back in her room, she packed her things. Tomorrow she would travel north, perhaps to Barcelona, or maybe she would stay a little longer. She no longer needed to plan so tightly. Life, she'd learned, was generous to those who stayed open. Before bed, she lit a small candle on the windowsill and opened her journal. "Alex wrote to me, 'Leo understands. Nora's quiet, but quiet can be the start of change. Maybe we'll meet again soon, not as rescuers or dependents, but as equals. That's all I ever wanted.'" She added another line. "I've met a woman named Clara. Maybe we're all collecting each other's stories, like seashells from the same shore." Outside, the city glowed under the moon. Evelyn blew out the candle and lay back on the bed, feeling the warmth of the day still in her skin. Tomorrow would come, as it always did. But tonight, there was only the hum of distant guitars, the faint scent of oranges, and the steady beat of her own heart, a rhythm she had finally learned to trust. She whispered into the dark, "I'm not coming home as I was. I'm coming home as who I became." Then she closed her eyes, smiling, ready at last for whatever waited beyond the dawn. Dawn rose over Granada in quiet gold. Evelyn stood by her window, suitcase ready, the letter from Alex tucked into her bag. The air smelled of rain and oranges. She took one last look at the hills and whispered, "Thank you," before stepping out into the morning. At the station, she bought a ticket north. The clerk asked, "Destination?" "Barcelona," she said. "One way." The train followed the coastline, sunlight flashing off the sea. Evelyn watched olive trees and white villages slip by like memory. She thought of the people who had shaped her journey: Yara in Istanbul, Min in Athens, Sophia in Lisbon, the dancer in Seville, and Clara, who believed forgotten women deserved stories. Each had given her something invisible, a reflection of the woman she'd once been and the one she was still becoming. Barcelona greeted her with noise and salt. From her small balcony, she could see the towers of the Sagrada Familia rising like hands in prayer. The city felt half-finished, and that felt right. She was, too. That evening, she wandered through El Born, where the air smelled of wine and grilled fish. A jazz trio played outside a cafe. Evelyn ordered a drink and sketched the scene: the guitarist's bent head, the girl dancing barefoot, the waiter balancing plates like an acrobat. Her lines moved easily now, unafraid of mistakes. When she looked up, Clara was at the doorway, smiling. "I told you we'd meet again," Clara said. "Or maybe you followed me," Evelyn teased. They walked along the beach after dinner, waves brushing their feet. "What happens next?" Clara asked. "I might go home," Evelyn said, "but only if it feels like a beginning, not a return." "That's the only way to do it," Clara said softly. "Never go back smaller." The next morning, Evelyn bought watercolor postcards and painted the sea from her balcony, its blue deep and endless. She mailed one to Leo. On the back she wrote, "Thank you for seeing me." Later, she visited the Sagrada Familia. Light streamed through stained glass in waves of red and gold. She sat quietly, feeling her breath steady. She didn't pray for forgiveness or luck, only for clarity. "Let me keep learning," she thought. "Let me stay awake." Outside, she bought a pendant from a vendor, a glass teardrop filled with sand. It felt cool and real, a small weight of everything she had carried. That night, she and Clara dined on a terrace above the harbor. "You'll go back soon," Clara said. "Yes," Evelyn said. "But I'm not returning to the same life." "We never do," Clara replied. "The road gives you back to yourself." Back in her room, Evelyn opened her journal. Things I know now. Leaving isn't running, it's choosing. Silence isn't peace if it costs your voice. I was never too old. I was only unfinished. The next morning, she checked out early. At the station, she bought a ticket home, not out of duty, but because she wanted to. The train hummed north through fields and sunlight. Evelyn watched her reflection in the window, older, lined, but alive. She didn't flinch from the face she saw. When her plane landed, no one waited at the gate, and that was fine. She took a taxi through quiet streets lined with blooming jacaranda. Her house looked exactly the same, the porch swept, the flowers still thriving under Carol's care. Inside, the stillness felt kind, not lonely. She set down her suitcase, boiled water, and poured tea into the blue and gold cup from Granada. The steam curled upward like breath. Her phone buzzed, a message from Leo. "Are you home? Dad wants to visit Sunday. No pressure." She smiled. "Sunday's perfect. I'll make dessert." When they arrived 2 days later, the air carried the awkwardness of a first meeting between old friends. But then Leo hugged her tight. Nora smiled, and Alex said softly, "You look different." "I am," she said, "and so are you." They ate in the garden beneath the vines. Sunlight flickered across their faces, and the conversation, though cautious, felt new. When they left, Alex lingered at the gate. "Mom," he said, "I'm glad you went." "So am I," Evelyn replied. After they drove away, the house was quiet again, but it was a full kind of quiet. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for your own breath." She closed the book and leaned back, listening to the world outside. The wind, a bird calling, a child's laughter somewhere down the street. If anyone passed by, they would have seen only an older woman sitting peacefully on her porch. But Evelyn knew better. She had gone around the world and returned not to where she started, but to who she had always been. And that, she thought, was home. Sometimes we don't need a map to find our way home, only the courage to take the first step. Evelyn's story reminds us that it's never too late to start again, to choose ourselves, and to reclaim the parts of life we once thought were lost forever. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect. Who in your life has been quietly forgotten, waiting for someone to see them again? Maybe it's a parent, a friend, or even yourself. Reach out. Begin again. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with us. If you believe stories like Evelyn's deserve to be told, please like this video, leave a comment about what moment resonated most with you, and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, healing, and rediscovery. Because sometimes a single story can remind us of what truly matters, and that the most beautiful journeys begin the moment we stop waiting for permission to live.